There's a limit empaths only see when it's too late. The line between kindness and self-destruction. You spend your life keeping everyone happy, smiling through pain, staying quiet when disrespected, giving even when there's nothing left to give. But one day, something inside you stops cooperating. You no longer want to apologize for feeling too much. You no longer want to fight just to be loved. And in that quiet rebellion, something shifts. Survival turns into awakening. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the process of separating from the persona, the social mask built from the fear of rejection. When you stop pleasing others, the first thing you encounter is isolation. Yet that isolation is the sacred space where the self, your true essence, finally begins to speak. Jung believed every human being lives between two worlds, the world of performance and the world of authenticity. When these two clash, the soul sends signals through exhaustion, confusion, and a strange disgust with yourself that you can't quite explain. But this isn't a collapse. It's the melting of the mask. The part of you that existed to be loved is dissolving, so the part of you that was born to live can finally return. That's why when an empath stops trying to please everyone, they don't become cold. They simply begin to see the truth. In this video, inspired by Carl Jung, we'll explore that turning point, the moment when kindness ceases to be an obligation and becomes an act of inner freedom. If you're an empath, you've probably grown used to apologizing for things that were never your fault. When someone frowns, your mind immediately assumes you did something wrong. When someone withdraws into silence, you rush to fill the space with kindness. This isn't weakness. It's a deep form of psychological conditioning. Carl Jung once said, "We become what the world rewards." And the world rewarded you for being agreeable, for being pleasant, for being the one who yields. Since childhood, every time you stepped back, someone smiled. Every time you put another's needs before your own, you were called a good child. Your subconscious learned an equation it never forgot. Love only comes when you are easy to love. The problem is that people-pleasing doesn't stop at behavior. It becomes a structure of the psyche. You don't just want others to be happy. You're terrified of disappointing them. Somewhere deep inside, another person's disapproval feels like abandonment. That fear runs so deep that when you try to say no, your body reacts as if committing a crime. Your heartbeat quickens, your throat tightens, and you soften your tone automatically, as if soothing the very person who once hurt you. Jung called this imprisonment within the persona, the state in which a person loses the boundary between genuine kindness and forced compliance. For the empath, this turns you into a mirror for others' emotions, reflecting their needs but blurring your own reflection. You tire easily, feel too deeply, and get wounded quickly, not because you're fragile, but because you're living multiple emotional lives at once. Eventually, something in you begins to notice the imbalance. You listen to everyone's stories, yet when you speak, no one truly stays. You give in the hope of being loved, but the affection you receive is born of dependency, not truth. The harder you try to maintain harmony, the emptier you feel, like pouring all your energy into a world that never looks back. And when you finally stop trying, the world pushes back. They'll call you distant, cold, even selfish. But in truth, that's only the sound of people losing the power to define you. Their discomfort says nothing about your worth. It simply means the mask that once kept them comfortable is beginning to melt. So if you're here, standing at that crossroads, don't be afraid. This isn't the end of who you are. It's the first step back toward who you've always been. In the next part, We'll dive into Jung's explanation of this phenomenon, the moment when the persona begins to crack and the true self prepares to emerge. Carl Jung believed that most people who live to please others are not truly kind. They are being driven by an unconscious fear, the fear of being cut off from love. In Jungian psychology, this part of us is called the persona, the social mask we construct to be accepted, to fit in, to avoid rejection by the tribe. For empaths, the persona is not just a role, it's a survival mechanism. You use kindness as armor, and because you've lived in survival mode for so long, you've forgotten how to live authentically. Jung wrote that when a person over-identifies with the persona, they slowly lose connection with the self, their original essence. This separation is the root of psychological exhaustion. You're not tired because you care too much about others. You're tired because you've forgotten how to care for yourself. Every time you say yes when your heart wants to say no, a small part of you leaves your body. Over time, you become a collage of other people's expectations and start calling it me. Awakening begins the moment you see through this illusion. When you stop believing that goodness defines your worth, you begin to touch what Jung called the healing shadow, the chamber that holds everything you were taught to deny: anger, pride, the need for respect, the longing to be seen. You thought these parts made you difficult, so you locked them away to protect the image of being nice. But those exiled fragments are the missing pieces of your wholeness. Jung once said, "There is no light without shadow, and no wholeness without facing what we repress." When the empath stops pleasing, this shadow begins to stir. You feel guilt when setting boundaries, fear when choosing honesty over harmony. But what you call guilt is actually your integrity returning. That discomfort is not proof that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're breaking an old psychological spell. Jung called this the moment of reunion with the self. Only from here can kindness become pure again, not a plea for love, but a reflection of freedom. So if you're feeling the tension between who you were trained to be and who you are becoming, don't panic. It means the process is working. You are not losing your compassion. You are reclaiming ownership of it. If Jung's insights are helping you see your patterns more clearly, consider subscribing and staying on this journey with me. Each video explores another step toward healing and individuation, so you can live not as someone the world approves of, but as the person your soul has been waiting for you to become. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, this could not be truer. Because when you live to please others, what truly drives you isn't kindness. It's the fear of being abandoned. Beneath every automatic yes, beneath every polite smile, lies an ancient memory. Love was only safe when you behaved. The child inside you learned to read the emotions of others to survive and grew up believing, if they're upset, I must have done something wrong. Jung called this phenomenon the shadow bond, an unconscious thread that ties your identity to the emotions of others. You don't just empathize, you absorb. When someone is in pain, you feel responsible. When someone is angry, you rush to fix it. But what feels like compassion is often a subtle form of control. You're trying to make everything peaceful to soothe your terror of rejection. The tragedy is, the more you try to keep the peace, the further you drift from yourself. You forget where their emotions end and yours begin. Jung believed a person only becomes free when they can detach the ego from this emotional collective. But that separation is rarely gentle. When the mask starts to melt, all the exiled parts rise to the surface. The anger you suppressed, the exhaustion you ignored, the longing for respect you once labeled as selfish. You start to feel disoriented, asking, "Am I becoming worse?" But you're not. You're becoming whole. What's surfacing isn't corruption, it's recovery. The parts of you that were denied are finally coming home. Most empaths fear this stage. They feel abandoned because the world no longer applauds them for being endlessly giving. The people who once praised your kindness may now step back, uncomfortable with your boundaries. Yet this is the pivotal moment Jung described as crossing the twilight of the persona to meet the self. In this darkness, a painful truth emerges, one that few ever face. Sometimes you must lose the image of being good to save your soul. That unconscious mechanism once chained you to an endless loop. Appease, endure, forgive, repeat. But the moment you stop, the darkness shifts. It no longer hunts you, it guides you. Jung called this integration, the sacred marriage of light and shadow. You no longer have to choose between compassion and boundaries, between love and self-respect. You can embody both, because genuine kindness doesn't exclude strength. It's born from it. If you've ever felt guilty for simply wanting to be respected, this is the threshold you must cross. Because on the other side of that guilt lies the most profound transformation Jung described. Only those who have faced their own darkness are truly capable of love. And when that happens, the empath is no longer a victim of other people's emotions. They become the sovereign of their own inner world. Imagine the mask you've worn for years. Thin, refined, perfectly fitted, so seamless that you almost forgot it was ever there. In the beginning, it kept you safe. It made others feel comfortable, earned you acceptance, and helped you survive. But over time, the warmth inside you began to melt it. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just one day, you feel a drop slide down your cheek and realize it isn't a tear. It's a part of you that once existed only to hide your tears. Carl Jung described this moment as the meeting point between the false and the true. The mask doesn't melt because you destroy it. It melts because you start living too authentically. That authenticity burns hotter than any pretense can endure. When you say your first honest no, a fragment softens. When you stay silent instead of forcing yourself to please, another piece falls away. And when you stop fearing someone's disappointment, the entire wax shell begins to dissolve, revealing the real face beneath, not perfect, but alive. The painful part is that as the mask melts, the world begins to see you differently. Those who adored your gentleness start to feel uneasy. Those who depended on your compliance drift away. Because the mask didn't just hide you, it comforted them. It allowed them to enjoy your light without ever being challenged by its heat. And when it's gone, they must face the truth. Your kindness was often purchased by your silence. Yet within that slow melting lies a strange kind of grace. You find yourself breathing easier, speaking slower, responding less, and listening more to yourself. You start to recognize the face in the mirror not as a performance, but as a presence. It's still you, but something has shifted. The eyes are clearer, steadier, touched by distance, as if you've returned from a place everyone travels through but few survive. Jung wrote that once a person touches their own authenticity, they lose the capacity to live falsely, not because they can't, but because they no longer want to. The empath, after their mask melts, no longer needs applause to feel worthy. They understand that kindness doesn't need an audience, and silence can sometimes be the purest form of love. The melting mask isn't just a metaphor for change, it's a ritual of rebirth. As the false melts away, the real begins to take shape. And in the cool ashes of who you once pretended to be, a new face opens its eyes for the very first time, not to look at others, but to finally see itself. If you've ever been an empath, you probably know this feeling. You walk into a room and instantly sense who's sad, who's angry, who's breaking inside, yet you have no idea how you feel. You're so attuned that a single shift in someone's tone can make your chest tighten. What was once your gift has become your burden. You've spent so long reading others that you've forgotten how to read yourself. Carl Jung called this state a disconnection from the self, when all your energy flows outward to sense, to fix, to harmonize. You do everything to keep others comfortable, even as your own body begins to collapse. And the painful irony is that you still call it love. But in truth, it's fear wearing the mask of kindness, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being left behind, fear that if you stop caring, no one will stay. So you become the person who understands everyone but yourself. You comfort others with words you've never received. You soothe wounds that still ache inside you. And when everyone leaves, the room falls silent. It's just you again, drained but smiling as if nothing's wrong. That's how the empath fades, not through lies, but through loyalty to the image of being the good one. Then one day, that image stops fitting. You start saying no, with trembling hands, but you say it. You stay silent when someone explodes. You stop blaming yourself for other people's disappointment. At first, it feels hollow, then guilty, then terrifying. But somewhere inside that fear, a quiet truth arrives. You realize you're still okay. The world doesn't collapse when you're honest. No one truly leaves, except those who were never there for the real you. Jung described this stage as the mirror of reflection, the moment you finally turn the gaze inward. When you look into that mirror, you no longer see a victim, but a person relearning how to exist. You see the fatigue in your eyes, but for the first time, you don't look away. You meet your own gaze and whisper, "I'm still here." You no longer need to make anyone else happy. You just need to pause long enough to remember that even when no one needs you, you are still worthy, simply because you are breathing. And in that realization, something miraculous happens. For the first time, you don't have to pretend anymore. What keeps an empath trapped is not their kindness. It's the language they use to describe what they endure. They call exhaustion giving. They call the fear of abandonment unconditional love. They call being crossed over acceptance. Jung once said, "The language of the unconscious shapes the reality we live in." If you never change your vocabulary, you'll keep reliving the same cycle, the same words, the same roles, the same quiet self-betrayal dressed as virtue. Reframing means learning a new language to define yourself. When you say, "I'm selfish for choosing myself," your mind reacts with guilt. But if you change it to, "I'm choosing what's true," your whole body exhales. When you say, "I disappointed them," you feel like a destroyer. But when you say, "I stopped pretending," you realize you're simply being honest. The facts don't change, only the framing does. Yet that single shift in language frees you from years of unconscious conditioning. Jung believed that once a person begins to speak in a language aligned with their essence, they enter a higher level of awareness, the realm of inner sovereignty. The empath is no longer a victim of their own goodness. They become someone who chooses. They don't hide their compassion, but they no longer allow it to be used against them. When you reframe, "I have to" becomes "I choose to." And in that moment, You understand that real freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's daring to stop doing what's no longer true for you. Reframing doesn't mean turning against the world. It means learning not to betray yourself. You don't need to harden to feel safe. You only need to be honest about what you feel. When you can say, "I understand your pain, but I will not carry it for you," you are setting boundaries without losing compassion. You are turning kindness into directed energy, no longer leaking, but radiating. Still, this is where most empaths falter. The silence that follows truth can feel terrifying. No more applause, no more nods of approval. And in that quiet, your mind starts whispering, "Maybe I've changed too much." That is the most dangerous moment, when the shadow of the persona tries to drag you back. You will want to return to being the good one, just to be loved again. But Jung warned, if you do not become who the unconscious calls you to be, you will live as a ghost of yourself. Many empaths stop right here, too far to go back, not far enough to be free. And it's in that in-between space that the soul becomes stuck. So if you find yourself standing in that silence, don't walk away. Stay. Because in the final part of this video, you'll see what most people never realize. When an empath stops pleasing everyone, they don't lose their kindness. They just finally start loving the right people. Awakening doesn't come from understanding more. It comes from living differently, every single day. Carl Jung said, "There is no transformation without action." And for the empath, the first action is not to give, it's to pause. Below are 4 small practices powerful enough to melt the old mask and let kindness return to its truest form. First, pause before you react. When someone needs you, don't answer right away. Take a breath and ask, "Do I truly want this, or am I just afraid of being disliked?" The moment you pause, the unconscious loses control. Second, name the feeling instead of justifying it. If you're tired, don't say, "I'm fine." Say, "I need quiet." Every time you call a feeling by its real name, you pull yourself back into presence. Third, boundaries are prayers of the soul. Setting limits isn't an act of rejection. It's how you keep compassion from bleeding out. Remember, you cannot heal anyone while you're still bleeding yourself. Fourth, rewrite the story of kindness. Each day, ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? The first answer is instinct. The second one, that's the truth. These steps won't turn you into someone else. They'll simply bring you back to who you are, responding not from fear, but from awareness. And that is kindness in its highest form, awake yet gentle, soft yet unwavering. When an empath learns to stop pleasing everyone, life doesn't get easier, it gets real. You begin to see who loves you for who you are, and who loves you for the convenience you provide. Some relationships will fracture, a few people will drift away, and most of the world will no longer look at you the same. But Jung said, no one can step into the light without first passing through loss. The loneliness that follows awakening is not punishment. It is the initiation of a new self. Then something strange happens. When you stop living to be loved, genuine relationships start to find you. The ones who don't fear your silence, who don't run from your boundaries, who don't treat your kindness as a tool for control. They are the ones who can stand beside you without needing you to perform for their comfort. And in that quiet, you finally understand what Jung meant when he wrote, "True love does not consume, it liberates." The consequence of living truthfully is not loss, but purification. You no longer need to prove your worth through endless giving, because now you see value in keeping what sustains you. Your silence is no longer armor, but a sacred boundary. You start listening less, but understanding more. Speaking less, but meaning more. Feeling less for everyone, but loving more deeply for real. Jung called this state sovereignty, inner self-governance. It is not power over others. It is the power to not let anyone manipulate your emotions again. The awakened empath no longer moves to the noise of the crowd because they've learned how to hear their own inner voice. The price to reach this place is the death of an old image, the good person the world once adored. But the reward is peace that cannot be taken away. Not the peace that comes from approval, but the one that comes when you finally stop asking for permission to be yourself. And when you look back, you'll realize true kindness was never weakness. It only became distorted when it was forced to serve everyone else. Once it returns to you, it becomes a light, one that doesn't heal others by effort, but by example. As Jung said, you no longer heal people. You simply become the living proof that healing is possible. Imagine yourself standing at a quiet crossroads. The old path leads back to the familiar, the nods, the approval, the safety of being agreeable. The new path is veiled in mist, no guide in sight. You look around. The faces that once praised your gentleness are gone. All that remains is open space. But this time, the silence isn't frightening, because now, you know you're walking on your own. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now, you have done exactly that. You no longer fear your own shadow, because you see it for what it truly is, the part that points you home. You no longer need to please others to stay, because you've learned how to stay with yourself. Your kindness is no longer fragile, it's steady. It no longer seeks validation, it radiates quietly. You've come to understand that silence isn't emptiness, it's the space where your true self can finally be heard. And when people look at you now, they no longer see someone who always understands them. They see someone who is peacefully beyond the need to explain. If these words made you pause, even for a moment, to listen inwardly, consider subscribing. Not as a click, but as a small promise to keep walking this path. Each day, another fragment of you will be named, understood, and welcomed home. Because perhaps, in the next video, you won't be searching for how to heal anymore. You'll begin exploring how to live truthfully, even when no one applauds.